Okay, Netflix. They look like they were the last holdout to raise subscription prices on their ad-free service, but looks like they're going to do it as soon as the writer's strike ends. The old game of freeware looks like it's dying now. Everybody in the business has figured out we got to start charging more money for this.
Yeah, especially in the world of streaming media. Remember, we saw some big losses from a lot of these streaming companies because they're paying not only for the infrastructure, but for the actual product. You know, they're putting out a lot of
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, October 6th. See, this is why I'm going to get a new open. You won't have to listen to me screw this up anymore. Friday, October 6th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Silicon Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman of NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, Scott, so it's been a little while, but actually I think it's faster than usual the way the wheels of justice turn. But the trial for FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried started this week in New York. Okay, so obviously you're going to get two very different stories, but this one can't be much more different. The defense is saying that he was just a nerd with a pretty lousy business sense. He didn't party, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke. He was just kind of a idiot savant, a brilliant tech guy and a real life goof off. And he really can't be blamed because his heart is in the right place. The prosecution, on the contrary, is saying a guy that buys a $50 million penthouse and hangs out with Bill Clinton and Tom Brady is not just a math nerd. He has perpetrated one of the biggest financial cons in the history of the United States of America. Now, I have to admit, watching him on TV, stumble around and, this kind of doughy guy with crazy hair, I thought, okay, yeah, maybe he is an idiot. He's just brilliant at math. And yet, all the evidence seems to suggest this was pretty conscious. What do you think? Where do you come down on all this? What do you think the jury's going to think of all this?
Well, the jury may have already seen and heard a lot about this because it's such a famous, notorious supernova of a, crypto explosion that happened, and he was the head of it. They also probably heard of him and saw some of his actions when FTX was going well. He was making all these donations. Like you said, he was palling around with famous people. He got even more famous people to endorse his product. So he's a really well-known guy for his smarts, and it all exploded. And you're right. I mean, the defense is going to say he was in over his head and he will blame other people, as he's already tried to do. Right. One of the many, many factors against him is that his co-founder, his business partners, his friends, they're all turning against him and testifying against him. And these are the insiders of FTX. So it looks really, really bad.
Yeah. The prosecution said his wealth and influence were all based on lies. And yet it was a real company. I mean, it wasn't a bad idea for a company. It seems like there's another case where it started to go sideways and they didn't want to give up on the dream, and they didn't care how much damage it did, as long as they preserve what they could and put it in their pockets and live well.
I mean, I would push back on a couple of those things. It didn't just go sideways. This was a really, really bad idea for a company simply because it was based on something, crypto, that was risky, and then based on their own coins that were worthless. And so something on a worthless foundation is going to crumble. They should have seen that coming from the get-go. And then it wasn't just that things got out of control. They moved money illegally from client accounts.
Well, once they saw it was sliding, they started doing everything illegal, hiding money and everything else. No question about that. But I'm wondering about the precipitating event. Did they know that was coming? did they know from the beginning that, that basically that's stated by the prosecutor, the whole thing was built on lies? Was it all built on lies?
Well, I mean, it was sort of the
You
definition.
could say all of crypto is a lie. I know how you feel about crypto, that it's all a fraud, but there's an awful lot of people that's, for a long time, I don't think they believe it anymore, really thought crypto was the currency of the future and was going to change the world economy.
Well, look, I mean, people have still made money and are still holding something like Bitcoin, which, I hesitate to use the word stable for anything involving crypto, but look at the price of Bitcoin. It has stayed high and fairly stably strong since that, tumultuous fall after the Matt Damon ad and the Super Bowl and all that. It's been around 25,000 a coin for a long time, whatever that means. But for FTX, when things started to go south, they didn't just treat their investors and clients as a VC would and say, oh, the investment is down and we're sorry, but we've lost money. They took money and then moved it illegally. And I think that's going to be fairly easy to prove, and I'm guessing to prosecute.
Okay. What kind of punishment you've been around an awful lot of trials lately? Assuming he's found guilty on multiple counts, which I think is probably going to happen. What should be I notice, there's a lot of people that have a stake in him not getting a really bad punishment. I mean, he was very good for certain politicians, and there's a certain amount of cover being run for him. What do you think? They're going to let him off lightly, or is he going down forever?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the sentence could be decades, to the point where it's essentially a life sentence. Clearly, everyone around him is trying to shorten their own sentences by turning and testifying against Bankman-Fried. I really don't have a sense of just what the punishment would be other than decades behind bars. You give me too much credit. I've been around one case and got kind of famous for covering it. I get it. But this is a different one. And, it's fraud. It's business fraud. It's investors that were burned. And so there are some similarities between SBF and Elizabeth Holmes, at least on the outset. She was found guilty and given a fairly harsh punishment. I don't see how he avoids this simply because we now know that Bitcoin is real and that this money was really there. This isn't some fly-by-night mistake he made. These were honest to goodness dollars that he was fronting, and then, we will be led to believe, illegally moving when everything went south.
Right. Okay, but at least he has a new suit and a nice short haircut. I mean, he goes in front of Congress dressed like a guy in a frat house, not a frat house, in a sleazy dorm, and all of his public appearances, but now in court, he's looking like a junior executive.
It's interesting because, with the, the sort of big hair and the sloppiness, people were saying, oh, he's the wonderkin, the young guy. He's not that young. He's not young where he didn't know what he was doing. But instead of sticking with that, he's a sloppy frat guy sort of look, now he wants to be like a respectable banker. But I don't know if that then puts him in the category of adult who is therefore responsible for his own actions. Yeah,
I would think that would undermine the defense. And yet they're probably the ones that told him to put on those clothes. Like, every low-life guy being brought into court who cleans up and looks like a choir boy.
Right. I mean, I think the big question here is, what is the defense really? What is it going to come down to? We know about the charges. We know that people are testifying against him. We saw this implode in front of our very eyes. So how do you defend this in a trial? I'm really curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think it's got to be, he's an idiot. He's an idiot defense. I can't think of another one. The fact that he knew enough how to move money around and hide it suggests he's not as stupid as they want to present it, or a savant to the way they want to present it. So we'll see. It should probably last, a month or so? We'll be talking about for the next few weeks.
Right. I don't know how long. I mean, really, I'm the worst person to ask. Again, the one trial I covered of a financial nature, of this nature, people were like, oh, what'll it last, a month? And we were still covering it a year and a half later. So who knows how long this goes?
Well, we'll see. Okay. The stock market. Stock market had a pretty good day Wednesday. What numbers do you have for Thursday?
Thursday was pretty flat, down about 10 points on the Dow, 15 on the NASDAQ, and that was Thursday. Yeah. So, September's bad month is sort of lapsing into October so far, but not in a huge downward direction, but still some selling.
Yeah, not a big October surprise, but there has been a lot of the bonds. The bond mania seems to have abated a little bit. But so we have ourselves this kind of weird situation. The Dow and the NASDAQ basically wiped out all of their gains since the first of the year, which suggests bad stuff. Revisions on the unemployment level didn't help. And yet Tesla and Alphabet stock up. And Ford just announced that the sales of its hybrids are going through the roof, which suggests that consumers are still willing to spend discretionary funds to buy things they like, of consumer products. So what does all this mean? I mean, are we still looking at a possible soft landing, or are we looking at a recession? I mean, it seems like we can't predict the future yet. Do you feel like there's anything out there that suggests one scenario or another?
It's hard to say. I mean, the inflation concerns, I get it. After all, prices are still high. Here in California, gas prices are nearing records again, despite the Fed raising interest rates, which means not only are prices high, but your credit card bills are high, your student loans are high, mortgage rates are high. So everything is really expensive. On the other hand, like you just said, the consumer is buying in, literally. The job rate is still very high. Salaries are doing well overall. So our economy is moving well, but people are having to spend a lot to keep up. And that often leads to a bad end, but it hasn't so far. But you look at things like gas prices and even grocery prices, you understand why the Fed is hesitant to say, okay, we're finished fighting inflation, we're not going to raise rates anymore. But as they raise rates, a lot of the economy, and I'm thinking of, say, housing, house purchases and things like that, has skidded to a near halt because these rates, while not as high as the ones my parents paid, are high for this generation. And if you're already looking at an average home price in the Bay Area of something like 1.2, 1.3 million, knowing that the mortgage rate is that high, it's really paralyzing the market for a little bit here.
Yet aren't housing prices begin kind of climb again in the Valley?
Right, year over year.
Where's that coming from? A shortage of houses, obviously, but
yes,
with the current interest rates and inflation and everything else, I mean, why would people be willing to pay a little more now for houses in the Valley or the Bay Area?
Well, right, there's a big shortage. And so when one does go on the market, people are telling me, both shoppers, potential home buyers and real estate agents, saying they're back to getting multiple offers and even overbidding because there's so little inventory. One of the reasons there's so little inventory is, think about it. If you own a house right now and you've owned it for a little bit, your mortgage rate is probably in the 3s. So if you sell your house now, and again, even if you've owned it for a while and would make a nice chunk of money, the next house you own, no matter where in the country you own it, your mortgage rate is going to be double, maybe even more than double what you're paying. Right. And so people are not only a little nervous about buying, they're nervous about selling right now.
Okay, we're going to go to the other side of the world now. China's BYD, they make electric cars. They seem to be on track to actually surpass Tesla as the world's #1 electric car maker. That's an interesting thing. Now, here's the question. I told you I've been watching all these news stories emanating out of China. There's been a whole bunch of stories of these BYD cars exploding into flames at stoplights, driving down the highway, burning down nearby buildings. I mean, they don't seem to be of the highest quality. There's also, I've seen a lot of pictures of gigantic parking lots filled with thousands of these unsold cars. So is this explosive growth of BYD real, or is it is this another Huawei? They had that new phone come out, was supposed to have that super great chip, and it was going to compete directly with the iPhone. And the Chinese government actually promoted it as a patriotic act to buy this thing. Then you see videos by users on TikTok showing all the things wrong with that phone and how that chip really isn't the high performer everybody thought it was going to be. Is this another one of these, an overinflated, over promoted, you're not a true patriot if you don't buy one of these? Is that what's driving this thing? Or is this BYD's got a good car at a good price and they're beating Tesla into the world market?
I mean, a couple of things. One, do you really want to call it explosive growth? And two, we know BYD is selling a lot of cars, but how many cars? We just can't trust sales figures from China. We have to know that by now. We can't trust sales figures. We can't trust COVID figures from China. We just can't. And that's on purpose, and we just can't. So I don't know. I wouldn't worry. And clearly Tesla is not going to worry about that. They're selling cars in China. They're, manufacturing cars all over the world. Their stock price is still high. My initial take is the more EVs out there, the better and the cleaner, and let's do it. But as far as competitive sales figures versus a Chinese company, I just don't know that you can trust the figures that are coming out of there. Yeah,
and what's the carbon content of a burning EYB car, BYD car? How many hydrocarbons does that put out into the atmosphere? Okay, the FTC. This was interesting. Did you see this? The FTC has accused Amazon of using an algorithm codenamed Project Nessie to test how much it could raise prices in a way that competitors would imitate. In other words, how much can Amazon jack up prices and still have the competition feel obliged to raise their prices in concert with them instead of trying to undercut Amazon? Now, this all came out as part of discovery in that antitrust suit that's going on. It's kind of an interesting app because I think it has some larger implications, which is that anti-competitive? And it seems like it is one of those things that it has an AI component in it that's saying, yeah, you can raise another buck on those socks because Hanes is going to have to come raise it a buck too because of you. And the losers are the consumers because it's basically figuring out how to get more money out of us for exactly the same thing and not have an alternative.
Precisely. I mean, last week you said, is there a way that Amazon, which is so convenient, could possibly be doing anything anti-consumer? And then I said, yes, of course there are ways that a company that gigantic and that dominant can be both convenient and even cheap and anti-consumer at the same time. And I think the more the FTC digs into this, the more we're likely to find these things. And that's why the FTC's spider sense, I think, was tingling from the beginning. And this is healthy to look into Amazon like this because Amazon, much like the Walmart of days past, is really how the retail world happens, right? And so if they are doing anything in an anti-competitive way, it's hurting the entire retail world and therefore hurting consumers. And that's why the FTC exists, to protect you.
Yeah, what seemed like started out as a vendetta actually is turning out to be a real case and a serious case.
Sure.
It'll be interesting what comes out of this, what kind of constraints and punishments are put on Amazon. All this is true. I imagine it's a very large number and a lot of rulings on what they're able to do competitively. Okay, Netflix. They look like they were the last holdout to raise subscription prices on their ad-free service, but looks like they're going to do it as soon as the writer's strike ends. The old game of freeware looks like it's dying now. Everybody in the business has figured out we got to start charging more money for this.
Yeah, especially in the world of streaming media. Remember, we saw some big losses from a lot of these streaming companies because they're paying not only for the infrastructure, but for the actual product. They're putting out a lot of a lot of interesting, a lot of downloaded, a lot of original content. Good for them, good for us for getting it. But yeah, some of those loss figures that were coming in were pretty staggering. Now, Netflix has managed to avoid that the whole time. They charged from the jump. And I think they just realized that this is not a business that's getting less expensive. And perhaps especially post-strike settlement, it gets more expensive to pay for this stuff. And maybe it should. And so consumers have to pay up. And I wonder if this means we as consumers will start to get a little more discerning, a little more discriminating in which streaming services we decide to subscribe to. Because I know a lot of people who have 4 or 5 at the same time, which how in the world do you choose what to watch tonight? But also those costs add up, especially if you throw in cable and stuff like that.
Yeah. And you're looking at one of those families right here. And you know, as these we get these notices that our subscription is ending, there's sort of like a 30-second discussion. Do we watch anything on? No, bye. And we've stripped out almost everything now, I have to admit. But not Netflix. Not Netflix, interestingly. So maybe they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and they really have been a superbly run company that has really, really delivered both to consumers, I would say, and definitely to investors. But there's a lot of competition out there. And if you're going to outbid the competition for the next, Squid Game or whatever, you've got to pay. And that's what all of these services are realizing is they're paying premium dollars for premium content. And I wonder if they all survive or if there's some merging that happens. Who knows? But this is not a cheap field to get into if you want to stay alive and grow.
Well, given the larger news out there, I think the Disney service may be up for sale soon.
I mean, Disney's talking about maybe spinning off its broadcast television. Imagine that.
Yeah, spinning off everything. Okay, and on the same type of story, Meta is going to try out a $14 fee for Facebook and Instagram in Europe. That's kind of a response to a legal situation where they're not being allowed to, harvest information and offer their services free. So they're going to start charging $14. Think it'll work? Think that will mollify the EU?
Maybe. I mean, Europe is a different animal. The EU is a different animal as far as these things go for social media, especially. And that'll be
media companies.
Yeah, it'll be closely watched by us here in America who follow this stuff. I just don't see it being repeated or copied. I mean, maybe there's an ad-free version out there somewhere, but I just don't know if Facebook or Instagram would do it, or if people would be willing to pay.
Bring it on home.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, and look, given, the EU again is cracking down on Meta and its sites. Company seems to be doing pretty well here in the US. Just ask its investors, just ask its fans. It's still a machine that's cranking out a whole bunch of cash. And the FTC has, brought it on Capitol Hill a lot, but nothing has really changed.
Nothing is stuck. Yeah. Okay. And finally, well, I got one more after this, but Intel just announced it's going to spin off its programmable chip unit next January. Under CEO will be Sandra Rivera. Have you ever met her?
No.
I haven't either. It's interesting. So is Intel letting it go to allow it to operate independently to pursue new opportunities and get funding? Are they getting rid of a distraction for their mainstream, processor business, or are they jettisoning a loss leader? A division that's not doing as well as the rest of the company. Which one do you think?
I don't know. It could be any of those or all of those. I mean, Intel is literally that big ship in the ocean that is too slow to turn and keep up with the competition, and therefore it hasn't been relevant in years. So it's got to do something. And if spinning off divisions is what it does, remember, I mean, this is starting to remind me of General Electric of years past, which just got too big and just had to start selling things off and get leaner. And maybe Intel does the same. It's just the gorilla, but it's not a very strong or vibrant gorilla. It's just big. It's just really big.
It's got to shed some fat and get lean again.
Yeah.
But we'll see. That's a long process, and I don't know how much time Intel has. generations are still passing in the semiconductor world. Okay, finally, and this goes back to the Justice Department's legal fight with Google. And it was revealed, did you see this? This was really interesting. It was revealed that Apple had explored acquiring Bing from Microsoft, and it also had calls with DuckDuckGo about using its search engine for its Safari private browsing mode. You look at that, you look at the pie chart of how much of the market Google owns in search, and it's like the two other companies are just little slivers on that pie chart. Interesting move by Apple to do this. It's like it's gunning for another big fight. What do you think? Do you think those calls were real, or you thought maybe to scare Google, or what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, really, they wouldn't have scared Google. And I think the idea of buying Bing was just a loser. Because remember, Bing was brought back from the dead thanks to the whole ChatGPT thing and OpenAI. And credit to Satya Nadella for the way he set that up. And now Bing is relevant again. I never thought we'd be saying that. But DuckDuckGo has always been an interesting proposition, I thought, for Apple specifically. Because, look, Apple, like many tech companies, still sucks in our data, but they at least, talk a good game about privacy. DuckDuckGo is the search engine that is a favorite of those who value privacy. I thought Apple, and I never thought.
Yeah, it's a philosophical fit.
Yeah,
exactly. It may not be a true business fit, but it's truly a philosophical fit. These guys both seem to believe or give lip service to privacy.
Exactly.
So nothing's going to come out of it, do you think?
Probably not. Certainly not Bing, because now Bing is large again.
I don't think Microsoft is willing to give up Bing right now.
Right. So that's off the table. DuckDuckGo has, I think, been long an acquisition target because of the way it does search, but still, you just can't take on Google. So it would have to be absorbed by maybe an Apple or something that just wanted a company that wanted to make a statement. Our search does not keep your data, unlike the other guy. But would it be that much of a revenue generator? No, probably not.
Oh, I don't think it'd be a revenue generator, but I think it could be a marketing advantage. Announcing that it's now built in. And once again, we're watching out for you, the Apple user.
Yes, that makes sense.
If nothing else, that's really going to make DuckDuckGo acquisition target by somebody out there. They must be opening the champagne bottles.
if that's their goal, yeah.
That's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And get ready for some big changes here at the Silicon Insider. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.